The sound of the clock was louder than usual that morning. Tick, tick, tick. It echoed through the half-empty living room, bouncing off bare walls that once held framed memories of family vacations and anniversaries. I'd taken them down weeks ago, partly because I was repainting, but mostly because looking at them hurt. My name is Robert Hale, 68 years old, retired engineer, widower of 12 years, and according to my daughter, officially broke. The bank statements on the table were cruel in their simplicity. A few numbers that told the story of 40 years, shrunk to nothing. My small workshop had gone under last month. The new company that promised to buy me out dissolved before payment cleared. Just like that, decades of craftsmanship vanished into silence. I hadn't told Melissa yet. Or rather, I hadn't planned to tell her, but she found out anyway, through someone's husband, through gossip, through the kind of conversations that happen in golf clubs where people laugh about old men who lose everything. I was still holding the mug of black coffee when I heard tires on the gravel driveway. A sleek silver SUV glided to a stop beside my rusted Ford. I didn't need to look to know it was hers. Melissa never missed a chance to remind the neighborhood that she'd made it. The front door opened without a knock. It always did. "Dad!" Her voice carried that upward lilt, half affection, half announcement. Behind her came Ryan, wearing his permanent half-smirk, sunglasses still on indoors, scrolling his phone as if the world owed him applause. I stood. "Morning, sweetheart. You could have called." "Oh, please, you never answer." "And I was in the area," she said, brushing imaginary dust from her designer coat. She looked around, her eyes moving over my modest furniture, the faded rug, the mismatched cushions Eleanor had sewn years ago. "God, Dad, this place hasn't changed since Mom died. Don't you ever get tired of living in the past?" I smiled faintly because what else was there to do? "I like the past. It's quieter." Ryan chuckled without looking up. "Yeah, but quiet doesn't pay bills, does it?" Melissa swatted his arm playfully, then turned to me. "Anyway, I heard about the business. That's rough." She didn't sound sorry. She sounded entertained. "So what's the plan now? Retirement home? Or are you going to start one of those YouTube channels where old men fix radios?" Her laughter filled the room, light and sharp, slicing right through my chest. "I'm managing," I said, placing the coffee down carefully. "I still have savings. And the house? Oh, Dad," she sighed, walking toward the window. "You mean this place? You could sell it and have enough for a decent apartment somewhere. Honestly, this neighborhood's going downhill. It's not safe for someone your age." I looked at her reflection in the glass, her polished hair, her new diamond earrings, the faint sneer at the corner of her mouth. "It's been safe for 40 years. "Yeah, well, times change." She turned. "You're broke now. Maybe it's time you sold this old house and moved into a senior home." The words didn't land immediately. They hovered in the air like smoke, then settled in my gut like ash. "You're broke now." I wanted to tell her that money wasn't the measure of a man, that love and integrity had value beyond numbers, but her expression said she wouldn't understand. She didn't come here to help. She came here to confirm the rumor. "I'll be fine," I said simply. Ryan finally pocketed his phone. "You should listen to her, Mr. Hale. The market's good right now. Cash out while you still can. Otherwise, you'll be stuck here with repairs you can't afford." I looked at him, this man who wore my daughter's pride like armor, and wondered if he'd ever built anything in his life. "I'll think about it," I lied. "Good," Melissa said, already bored. "We'll help with the paperwork when you're ready. Oh, and..." She lifted her bag onto the table. "I need you to sign this. It's just a consent form for some insurance thing. Ryan thought it might help you manage finances." I took the paper, scanning quickly. The fine print mentioned joint authorization and financial access. Clever. "I'll read it later," I said, folding it neatly. She rolled her eyes. "Dad, you always overthink everything." "I've learned it's better than not thinking at all." Ryan laughed again, low and mocking. "Spoken like a true engineer. Too smart for his own good." They stayed for 20 minutes, long enough to criticize the peeling paint, suggest selling my late wife's piano, and remind me that pride doesn't pay for heating. When they finally left, the house exhaled relief. Through the window, I watched them walk to their SUV, their laughter trailing behind like perfume. Melissa paused by the car door and said something to Ryan that made him snort. She didn't know I was close enough to hear through the screen. He's basically useless now, she whispered. Let's just take what's left and put him somewhere cheap. The words weren't even angry. They were casual, as if discussing an unwanted pet. I stood frozen by the window until the SUV disappeared down the road. My hand trembled slightly, not from weakness but from restraint. The air inside the house felt heavier, thicker, full of memories that no longer comforted me. On the mantel stood the last photo of Eleanor, taken at the lake 2 summers before she died. Her hair was silver, her smile soft and knowing. She used to say, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. I hadn't believed it then. I believed it now. I picked up the photo frame, tracing her face with my thumb. They think I've lost everything, I said quietly. Let's prove them wrong. The evening sun slipped behind the oak trees outside, throwing long golden bars of light across the living room floor. Dust danced in the glow like slow-falling snow. I sat in my old armchair and listened to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, the faint creak of the house settling, each sound a reminder that this place, at least, was still alive. Dinner was simple, soup from a can, crackers, tea. But I set the table for 2, as I always did. Old habits die harder than hope. As I ate, I thought of the years I'd spent providing. 3 jobs at once, overtime shifts, saving for Melissa's college, helping her buy her first home. Every sacrifice I'd made had been wrapped in love and handed to her without receipt. Maybe that was my mistake, teaching her that love doesn't need repayment. The phone rang once that night. It was a number I didn't recognize, so I let it go. A minute later, a message came through. A realtor's voice, cheerful and professional. Mr. Hale, this is Carol from Northline Realty. Your daughter mentioned you might be interested in selling your property. I'd love to schedule a valuation. I closed my eyes. So it had already begun. Later, when the house went dark, I sat by the window watching the stars appear. They looked distant, cold, but constant. I found the old cigar box where I kept Eleanor's letters. Most were yellowed with age, her handwriting looping and graceful. In one of them she'd written, "If they ever make you feel small, remember, mountains don't kneel for the wind." That night, I wrote something new on a piece of scrap paper and placed it beside her photo. They think I'm broke. But the heart remembers how to build. The next morning I drove to the old workshop on the edge of town. The sign was still there. Hale Custom Woodworks, faded and sun-bleached. Inside, the scent of sawdust still lingered. Machines sat silent under dust sheets. I ran my hand over the workbench, feeling the grooves and cuts carved by decades of effort. My hands used to build tables for families, cabinets for newlyweds, cradles for babies. Now they trembled only when angry. I opened the small safe in the back office. Inside were receipts, blueprints, and the last set of financial ledgers. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I locked the door behind me, pocketed the key, and walked out into the sunlight. On the drive home, I passed Melissa's neighborhood, gated, sterile, perfect lawns without laughter. Through the bars, I saw her house, tall, symmetrical, sterile as a hotel lobby. She had everything money could buy, except warmth. I realized with quiet clarity that I didn't envy her. I pitied her. Back home, I poured myself another cup of coffee, opened a fresh notebook, and began to write. Plan of action was the first heading. Underneath it, 3 words: observe, prepare, rebuild. The world had taken my business. My daughter had taken my dignity. But I still had my discipline, and that, I knew, was worth more than gold. As night returned, I sat again in my armchair, holding Eleanor's photo. They think I've lost everything, I whispered. Let's prove them wrong. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves, carrying the faintest echo of her laughter. Before we continue, comment the word respect if you believe karma always finds its way home. 3 days passed before I saw Melissa again. I had almost convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, she'd let things rest. But selfish people don't rest, they plot. It was Thursday morning. The sun poured through the kitchen window, striking the same old floral curtain Eleanor had chosen 25 years ago. I was making oatmeal when I heard the faint vibration of my landline on the counter. Caller ID, Northline Realty. I didn't answer. The voicemail came through seconds later. Good morning, Mr. Hale. Just confirming our appointment for the property valuation this afternoon. Your daughter said you'd be home at 3. I set the spoon down slowly. Appointment, valuation, my own house. Melissa hadn't even bothered to tell me. By noon, the anger had settled into something colder. Clarity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't call her. I didn't storm into her home demanding respect. I simply sat at the dining table, pen and paper in hand, and began writing times, names, and details. I titled the page Incidents Eleanor used to say, "When they show you greed, don't shout, record." At 2:47 p.m., a white sedan pulled into my driveway. A woman in a red blazer stepped out, clipboard in hand. I opened the front door before she could knock. "Mr. Hale," she asked, smiling. "Carol from Northline Realty. Your daughter arranged for me to stop by." I nodded pleasantly. "Of course. Come in." Inside, she glanced around the living room, pretending not to notice the outdated wallpaper and worn sofa. "Lovely bones in this house," she said professionally. "So much potential. Your daughter mentioned you might be considering a sale." I smiled. "She's very considerate. Always helping." Carol relaxed, assuming I was the harmless old man she'd been told about. "That's wonderful. We can get a fair price, I'm sure. Location is strong and the lot size." Her words blurred as I watched her measuring walls, taking photos. Each click of the camera felt like an intrusion, but I said nothing. I wanted them all to think I'd given up. "Melissa and her husband will handle most of the paperwork," Carol added casually. "She said you prefer not to be burdened with the details." "Is that so?" I asked softly. She nodded. "She also mentioned you sometimes forget things." I looked her straight in the eye. "Only the things not worth remembering." Her smile faltered. "Oh, I didn't mean—" "It's fine," I said calmly. "I'm sure my daughter wants what's best for me." When she left an hour later, promising to email the preliminary valuation, I walked her to the door, polite as ever. Then I closed it, locked it, and exhaled. The air inside the house felt heavier, charged. The truth was no longer hidden. It was confirmed. My own daughter had given strangers permission to photograph, price, and discuss my home as if I were already gone. That evening, I decided to test something. I dialed Melissa's number. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad, I was just going to call you. Were you?" "Yeah, did Carol stop by?" "She's amazing, right? She's just checking options for when you're ready to, downsize." "Downsize," I repeated, tasting the word. "Don't take it the wrong way," she said quickly. "You've got a big house for one person. It's too much work, too many bills. This could be a good move." "I see." There was a pause. "You're not mad, are you?" "Mad? No." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Just tired." "That's what I figured," she said, relief flooding her voice. "Don't worry, Dad, we'll handle everything. You don't need to stress about numbers or contracts. Ryan's good with that stuff. I'm sure he is." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Not the silence of defeat this time, but of design. If they wanted to play the game of signatures and paperwork, I'd play it better. The next morning, I began documenting. I bought a small notebook, navy blue, thick pages, sturdy spine. On the first line, I wrote, February 18th, Melissa authorized property valuation without consent. Underneath realtor name, Carol, Northline Realty, 2:47 p.m. Each entry would be factual. Dated, unemotional. Facts were my new weapon. I went through my drawers and found an old camera, still functional. I began taking my own photos of every room, every corner, every piece of furniture that told the story of this house. The piano Eleanor played, the oak dining table we'd bought secondhand, the marks on the hallway wall from when Melissa was 7 and insisted on measuring her height every month. If they were going to sell this house, I would preserve its soul before they could erase it. By noon, I'd filled 10 pages with notes and photographs. That afternoon, I overheard another piece of their plan. I had forgotten to hang up after a short call, and the phone automatically redialed Melissa's number, as it sometimes did when handled too slowly. Through the receiver, I caught her voice mid-conversation. "No, it's in Dad's name, but he won't remember much. We'll handle it. Carol said we could list as soon as we get him to sign the preliminary." Ryan's voice came through, faint but clear. "Perfect. Let's make it fast before he changes his mind." I held the phone for a long time after they hung up, staring at nothing. My hand didn't shake this time. For the next week, I played my part. When Melissa visited, I pretended to forget small things. Dates, times, names. She seemed pleased, her smile more relaxed. Her tone softer, as if talking to a child. "See? This is why we need to take care of you." "Dad," she said one afternoon, patting my hand. I nodded mildly, all while my other hand quietly recorded the conversation on the small voice memo app of my phone. Inside, the man she believed senile was working overtime. Every night after she left, I opened my late wife's sewing cabinet and found the old folder labeled Home Repairs, 2003. Inside were Eleanor's sketches of how she wanted to renovate the house someday, expand the kitchen, open the living room, maybe build a sun porch facing the garden. She had written in the margin, "When we have time, we'll make it beautiful again." That note became my fuel. They wanted to erase this place. I would honor it. I began gathering tools from the garage, cleaning and testing them. Old drills, sanders, a small lathe. Most were still in perfect working condition. I started repairing little things, a squeaky door, a loose cabinet hinge, a cracked stair rail. Work steadied my hands, cleared my head. When I wasn't fixing the house, I was selling. In the back of my workshop, I found boxes of wooden trinkets and small inventions, handmade clocks, decorative boxes, even a few prototypes of adjustable tool holders I'd designed years ago. I took photos and quietly listed them online. The first sale came within hours, then another, then 3 more by the weekend. I wasn't making a fortune, but it wasn't about money. It was about proof that I still could. I began a second notebook titled Inventory. Every sale, every customer, every cent, orderly, clean, undeniable. Eleanor would have smiled. She used to say, "Creation is dignity's twin brother." One evening, I caught sight of Melissa's SUV parked outside again. I didn't open the door. I watched through the curtain as she stood on the porch talking to someone on her phone. "Yeah, Dad's getting weaker," she said. "He can't handle much paperwork. If we get him to sign next week, we can list by April. Once it's sold, we'll finally be free of him. Finally be free of him." The words slid through me like a knife made of ice. I closed the curtain softly, walked to the fireplace, and stared at the house around me. The wallpaper was fading, yes. The roof probably needed patching, but every inch of this place carried fingerprints of a life built by love. The scent of varnish from my workshop, the ghost of Eleanor's perfume in the hallway, the way the evening sun fell through the kitchen window and painted gold stripes on the floorboards. I placed my hand on the wooden banister and whispered, "No, Melissa, you'll be free from me." Then I went to my desk and began to write a new entry in my notebook. The first sentence marked the moment I stopped being the old man they pitied and became the man they would never see coming. From that night on, every detail mattered. I started recording receipts, utility payments, and property documents. I visited the bank, confirmed account access, changed passwords, and requested printed statements for record. Every small act was preparation. Every breath was patience, because when people steal your dignity, you don't steal it back. You earn it back quietly, piece by piece. And someday, when they think they've taken everything, you show them what everything really looks like. I looked around the house one last time before bed. The light from the street lamp filtered through the curtains, warm and steady, falling across Eleanor's photo on the mantel. She seemed to be smiling. The next few weeks passed like slow-moving clouds, quiet, shapeless, heavy with things unsaid. Melissa hadn't called, neither had Ryan, but the realtor's emails kept coming. Each subject line was another reminder of their plan: preliminary valuation, follow-up on property transfer, pending authorization. I never replied. Let them wonder. Silence was its own kind of reply. One afternoon, while reorganizing the house, I decided to clean out Eleanor's old sewing room. It had been closed for years, ever since the day she didn't come home from the hospital. The air inside still carried the faint scent of lavender oil and cotton thread. Sunlight slanted through the half-open blinds, turning the dust into gold flecks that danced over her sewing machine. I stood in the doorway for a long time, my hand on the frame, afraid to disturb the stillness. But grief that stays locked up too long begins to rot, and I needed to face it. The first drawer I opened was full of buttons, hundreds of them. She used to joke that every button had a memory. The blue ones were from my work shirts, the tiny pearl ones from Melissa's baby dress. Beneath the drawer, I found a small wooden jewelry box, the kind Eleanor kept on her dresser. The hinges were tarnished, but it still clicked open perfectly. Inside lay a few old brooches, her wedding ring, and a folded scrap of paper with a grocery list written in her neat, looping handwriting. I almost closed the box, but something odd caught my eye. The base felt thicker than it should have been, like there was a false bottom. I tilted it toward the window and faint sunlight revealed a seam along the inner edge. My heartbeat quickened. Using a small screwdriver from the desk, I pried gently. The wooden panel popped loose with a soft crack. Inside, covered in fine dust, was a single yellow envelope, sealed with wax. My wife's initials, E.H., were pressed into it. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sat down at her sewing table, hands trembling, and broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter on thick ivory paper, and beneath it, a folded legal document stamped with the logo of Harrison and Wells Bank. Her handwriting stopped my heart. My dearest Robert, if you are reading this, it means you've reached a season where faith feels small. I always knew you'd give more than you kept, and I worried one day someone would mistake your kindness for weakness. If that day has come, look for this. You built more than you realize. I had to stop reading. My eyes blurred, and for a moment the room seemed to tilt. The sound of the clock from the hallway was distant, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. When I could see again, I unfolded the bank document. My hands were shaking, but not from age, something deeper. The paper listed an account under my name, Robert Hale, primary beneficiary, and referenced ownership shares in Brighton Holdings, a regional development company I'd helped design a prototype for almost 30 years ago. I remembered vaguely signing consulting paperwork for them in the 90s, but never thought much of it after. According to the attached statement, the shares had accumulated dividends for decades, quietly compounding. There was a final line, written in Eleanor's hand. I wanted to surprise you one day, but life had other plans. Promise me you'll use this only when your heart feels tired, not your wallet. I laughed softly through tears. You were always 5 steps ahead, I whispered. The next few hours were a blur of disbelief. I sat surrounded by her old sewing patterns, her notes, her memories, and in the middle of it all, this letter that felt like a lifeline thrown across time. When dusk arrived, I couldn't sit still any longer. I needed to know if this was real. I drove to the one man I still trusted with my life, David Langford, an old lawyer friend who'd handled our estate papers years ago. David's office hadn't changed in 20 years. The same cracked leather chair, the same framed law degree slightly crooked on the wall. He looked up as I entered, adjusting his glasses. Robert Hale, he said, standing. I thought you were done with paperwork forever. Apparently not, I said, handing him the envelope. I need you to tell me if this means what I think it does. He unfolded the letter and document carefully, scanning with a frown of concentration. After a minute, he looked up. This is legitimate. Brighton Holdings merged with a real estate group last year. Their shares skyrocketed after a federal contract. These documents list you as owning 30% of the parent company's private equity. Robert, he leaned back, stunned. This is worth several $1 million, I blinked. You're joking. I wish I were. He smiled faintly. You're a very wealthy man, my friend. For a long moment, I said nothing. The words didn't fit into my reality. Wealth wasn't something I associated with myself. My wealth had always been measured in people. Eleanor's laughter, Melissa's childhood drawings, the pride of finishing a long week's work. Money was just numbers. But these numbers could rewrite everything. David leaned forward. What do you want to do with it? Nothing, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Not yet, I clarified. I don't want anyone to know, especially not my daughter. His expression softened. You're planning something. Maybe I am, he chuckled. Still the strategist. I'll verify the holdings quietly. I know a contact at Brighton's board. We'll confirm ownership under confidentiality. Thank you, David, he nodded. You sure you don't want to celebrate? That's life-changing news. I smiled faintly. It already changed my life once. I'd rather let it change hers later. That night I returned home and sat in the quiet sewing room again. I placed the letter under the lamp and read it once more, slowly this time. Every word felt deliberate, chosen with care, as if Eleanor knew exactly when I would find it. If you ever lose faith, look for this. You built more than you realize. She'd written it for a moment like this, for when the people I loved most made me doubt my worth. Outside, rain began to fall, soft and steady against the windows. I imagined her voice in the sound of it, calm and constant. I spoke aloud, as I had done for years when I missed her most. "You still protect me," I whispered. "Even from our own blood," the words echoed through the empty room. And for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt sacred. I tucked the letter and bank papers into a folder and locked them inside my small safe beneath the floorboards. Then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I poured myself a glass of Eleanor's favorite wine, sat by the window and smiled at the storm. The world outside didn't know it yet, but the story had changed. They thought I was broke. They thought I was finished. They thought they could take everything from me. But Eleanor, my quiet, brilliant wife, had left me a hidden weapon, faith with interest, and I intended to use it wisely. In the days that followed, David confirmed everything. The documents were valid, the account active, the shares untouched. The current valuation was nearly $4.8 million. My hands shook when I saw the number in print, not out of greed, but awe. He told me I could begin accessing dividends immediately, but I refused. Not yet. Timing mattered more than money. Meanwhile, Melissa continued her little charade. She sent texts pretending to care. "Dad, how are you feeling? Did you talk to Carol again? We could really help you sell faster. Ryan found a senior apartment that's perfect for you. Great amenities." I replied with short, polite messages. "Thanks, dear. I'll think about it. Maybe next week." All the while my plan was taking shape, I began small. Repaired the roof, painted the kitchen, cleaned the gutters. Every improvement reminded me that this house, my house, was worth more than their greed could measure. Each night, I'd open the safe, reread Eleanor's letter, and feel that quiet fire rekindle in my chest. She had seen what I couldn't. She had trusted me when even I didn't trust myself. The letter wasn't just money. It was purpose. It was proof that love leaves instructions for redemption, if you're patient enough to find them. One evening, I sat on the porch watching the sunset turn the sky amber. I imagined Eleanor sitting beside me, as she once did, her hand resting lightly on mine. "Can you believe this?" I murmured. "You saved me, again." In the silence that followed, I could almost hear her answer. "I didn't save you, Robert. I reminded you who you were. The world was about to learn that too, because now I had two things I hadn't had in years, power and peace, and both were going to be my answer to betrayal. The trap was set so perfectly I almost admired it. Almost. It began with a phone call from Melissa one Thursday evening, her voice dripping with concern that didn't belong to her. "Dad, we're worried about you," she said. "Ryan and I think it's time to talk about your future. Maybe a little get-together this weekend. Just family, I repeated, though I already knew what that meant. She went on about how she'd invited my sister, Claire, and her husband, how Ryan's parents were coming too, so everyone can be on the same page. Her words were polished, rehearsed. People only talk that carefully when they're lying. I said yes, of course. I even thanked her for caring. Let her think the net was closing around me, while I quietly sharpened my knife of patience. The dinner was held at a trendy restaurant downtown. When I arrived, everyone was already there. Melissa, radiant in her red dress, Ryan in his usual arrogance, and a few relatives who hadn't called me in years, suddenly smiling too wide. The table was long and full, wine glasses already half empty. "Dad," Melissa exclaimed, rising to hug me. The flash of a phone camera went off, Ryan documenting the moment like a circus tamer presenting his newest act. "Glad you could make it," he said. "We were just talking about your situation. Were you now?" I took my seat. "How thoughtful." They laughed lightly, pretending the tension wasn't thick enough to choke on. Dishes clattered, wine was poured, and between false compliments and fake concern, They took turns performing their parts. Finally, Melissa cleared her throat and placed a folder on the table. "Dad, this isn't easy for me," she began, her voice trembling just enough for sympathy. "We love you, but lately, you've been making mistakes, forgetting things, ignoring messages. We just want to help." Ryan slid the folder toward me. "It's a simple power of attorney form. Nothing major. Just allows us to handle bills, taxes, and legal stuff for you. Protect your interests." The word protect tasted like venom. I looked down at the papers, pages of legal text with my name sprinkled throughout, my future spelled out in clauses and subsections. I could almost hear Eleanor's voice whisper, "When they start talking about protection, they've already planned the theft." Melissa leaned closer. "Please, Dad, this is for your own good." Around the table, nods and murmurs of agreement followed like a chorus of well-trained vultures. I could see the anticipation in their eyes, waiting for the signature that would hand them everything they wanted. I smiled gently. "You're right, sweetheart. I've been tired lately. Maybe this is for the best." She blinked, surprised at how easily I surrendered. "Really?" "Of course," I said. "Family takes care of family." I reached for the pen. Their relief was almost audible, shoulders easing, smiles blooming, eyes glinting with premature victory. Slowly, I flipped through the pages, pretending to study them, then signed my name neatly, on the wrong line. The witness signature section. Melissa didn't notice. Neither did Ryan. They were too busy celebrating. Ryan raised his glass. "To family." "To family," I echoed softly. An hour later, the dinner turned into spectacle. Laughter got louder, jokes crueler. Someone, Ryan's mother, I think, asked how I planned to live after selling the house for peanuts. Another relative chuckled about Dad's memory fading faster than his wallet. And Melissa, my own daughter, recorded a short clip of me looking away from the camera and posted it online with the caption, "Dinner with Dad before his big move to senior living. New chapter." They laughed. Dozens of notifications lit up their phones within minutes. Likes, emojis, comments from friends saying how sweet it was they were helping me transition. None of them saw the humiliation behind my polite smile, but I saw everything. I saw Ryan's hand squeeze her knee under the table, silent code for "it's done." I saw Melissa's face soften with triumph, and I saw Eleanor's ring, her ring, on Melissa's hand. I didn't speak. I didn't fight. I just let them think they'd won. After dessert, Melissa kissed my cheek and whispered, "You'll thank me one day, Dad." I whispered back, "Maybe." That night, I drove home in silence. The house looked different now, emptier, yet somehow more alive, as if it sensed the storm brewing beneath my calm. I placed the folder on the table, turned on the lamp, and began reading. Every clause, every subsection, every hidden dagger was all there. Transfer of financial authority, property sale permissions, medical proxy rights. A complete erasure of independence disguised as care. I sat back, staring at the ceiling. The rage didn't burn this time. It crystallized. Then I smiled. I opened the drawer beneath the desk, pulled out a fresh set of legal documents, ones David had helped me prepare quietly over the last week. A notarized paper transferring every asset, property right, and future claim into a private trust under my exclusive control. The trust beneficiary, Robert Hale Living Legacy Foundation. Secondary beneficiary, Community Vocational School. Scholarship Fund, Eleanor Hale Memorial, not a penny. Would ever touch Melissa's hands. Placed her fake power of attorney papers inside an envelope marked void and slid my notarized trust documents on top. Then I sealed them in the safe beside Eleanor's letter. Everything they thought they were taking, I had already taken back. It was almost midnight when I stepped outside to the porch. The air was cold, the moon high, the world silent except for the hum of the streetlights. I could see my reflection in the window, tired, lined, but steady. On the kitchen table, I left a folded note. "Nothing long, nothing poetic, just truth. You said I was broke. I'm giving you exactly what you deserve. Nothing. Beside it, I placed the house keys, then I packed. Not much, just a duffel bag with clothes. Eleanor's photo, my notebooks, and the letter that had reignited my soul. At dawn, when the first light touched the horizon, I stood in the doorway one last time. The walls seemed to breathe softly as if wishing me well. "Take care of her, Eleanor," I whispered to the house. "She'll miss me more than she realizes." The door clicked shut behind me. I didn't drive fast. I didn't need to. The road stretched open and quiet ahead, dew glistening on the fields. The rising sun painted everything gold. Freedom didn't always roar. Sometimes it just sighed. As the town disappeared in my rearview mirror, I felt no anger, only clarity. They had mistaken silence for surrender. But silence, when chosen, is strategy. That morning, Melissa arrived at my house. I can imagine the scene even though I wasn't there. The smug expression fading as she read the note on the table. The confusion twisting into panic when she realized my safe was empty. My documents gone, my phone disconnected. Maybe she'd shout. Maybe she'd cry. Maybe Ryan would curse. None of it mattered. Because by the time they understood what I'd done, I'd already crossed the state line, heading toward a small lakeside cabin Eleanor and I used to rent in our younger years. The place was still listed under my name, still quiet, still waiting. I parked by the water's edge and stepped out. The air smelled like pine and memory. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I sat on the porch steps, watching the ripples dance across the lake's surface, and whispered to the wind, "It's your turn to rest now, my love. I'll handle the rest." Somewhere far away, Melissa was probably calling lawyers, asking questions, spinning lies. But none of her noise could reach this place, because peace once reclaimed becomes louder than revenge. If you think family should mean loyalty, comment the word family below. The cabin by the lake became my world for the next several months. It was small. 2 rooms, a crooked porch, a fireplace that smoked if you didn't open the window just right. But it was freedom. Freedom smells like damp wood, strong coffee, and silence. The first mornings were hard. Habit made me reach for my phone, for the noise, for proof that someone out there remembered me. But after a few weeks, the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt earned. Each day began with a walk along the water. The lake was glass in the mornings, reflecting pine trees and sunrise in colors too beautiful to deserve my thoughts about betrayal. Slowly, the rhythm of nature replaced the rhythm of anger. But peace doesn't mean passivity. Eleanor's letter hadn't just saved me emotionally. It had given me the means to rebuild. And I intended to do it in a way that would outlast gossip, mockery, and time itself. By April, the dividends from my Brighton Holdings shares began clearing through David's quiet handling. Every cent went into a separate account under the trust. When he called with updates, his voice was full of admiration. "Robert, you've done it. You could buy anything you want." "Not anything," I said. "Just something that feels like mine again." That something came 2 weeks later, when David forwarded a property listing with a short note. "Thought you might like this one. Too big for most buyers, too broken for the rest." The photo showed an abandoned estate on the outskirts of town, a crumbling Victorian villa surrounded by wild ivy and fallen shutters. Locals called it the Holloway Place. It had been empty for over a decade, its last owner gone bankrupt. Most people saw rot and ruin. I saw a mirror of myself. I drove out to see it the next morning. The gates leaned sideways, the gravel drive half swallowed by weeds. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, dust lay thick as memory, and sunlight leaked through cracks in the ceiling. But beneath it all, I could feel the bones, the strength that time hadn't taken. "This was never broken," I whispered. "Just waiting." By evening, the papers were signed. Paid in full. No mortgage. No family cosigners. No witnesses to argue later. Just me, my signature, and the hum of quiet redemption. The first weeks were pure labor. I hired a few local men, old hands who didn't ask questions and didn't talk too much. I paid them fairly, fed them well, and told them nothing beyond the next day's plan. We started with the roof, then the windows, then the rot in the beams. Every nail I hammered, every board I replaced felt like reclaiming a piece of my own name. Sometimes at night I'd stand in the great hall, nothing but scaffolding and shadows, and imagine how it would look finished. Golden light, polished oak floors, the scent of cedar and fresh paint replacing the ghosts of mildew. It became more than construction. It became ritual. I woke before sunrise, worked until dusk, and slept with the exhaustion of a man finally doing something for himself. The days stretched into weeks, the weeks into months. The house began to change shape, and so did I. The anger that once lived in my chest turned into focus. The shame that had whispered at night turned into pride. I wrote every expense in my notebook, the same way I had documented their betrayals. But this time, each line was creation, not evidence. New roof beams, $7,200 refinished staircase, $3,400 garden restoration, priceless. In June, I found an old piano buried beneath a tarp in one of the back rooms. The keys were yellowed, the strings rusted, but when I pressed the middle C, it still made a sound. A faint, wavering note, but alive. I spent 2 weeks restoring it by hand. When it was done, I placed it near the window that caught the morning sun. The first time I played it, clumsy and slow, the music filled the hall like a benediction. I could almost hear Eleanor humming along. It hit me then that this mansion wasn't just a home, it was a resurrection. They thought they had stripped me bare. But you can't bankrupt what doesn't belong to the world. Peace, purpose, integrity, those were never for sale. I whispered it out loud, letting the words echo through the halls as if speaking to every nail and beam. They said I was broke. But peace, purpose, and integrity, those were never for sale. By August, the transformation was nearly complete. The estate no longer looked abandoned. It looked reborn. The gardens bloomed again. The old fountain ran clear, and the hall lights glowed warm against newly polished floors. I even restored the library, lining the shelves with books Eleanor had loved, Shakespeare, Austen, and the old history volumes she'd used to quote during dinner debates. I never told anyone where I'd gone. Not David, not Claire, and certainly not Melissa. In their minds, I was probably living in some dull senior apartment, muttering about bills and medicine. Let them believe it. Let them think they'd won. Victory doesn't always announce itself. It waits quietly until someone looks up and realizes the world changed without them. One evening, after months of work, I stood at the mansion's grand doorway as sunset poured through the stained glass above it. The light broke into colors, amber, ruby, sapphire, painting the floor in warmth. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the porch, notebook open on my knee. On one page, I listed the repairs left to do. Guest wing flooring, outdoor lighting, new gravel for the driveway. On the opposite page, I began a letter. Not a legal one this time. Personal one. Melissa, it's been a while. I hope you're well. I've been working on something I'd like to show you. Dinner next Saturday. Address enclosed. I sealed it in an envelope with no return address and mailed it the next morning. As I watched the postman's truck disappear down the road, I felt neither anger nor anticipation. Only calm, the kind of calm that comes when a man knows exactly what he's doing and why, because this dinner wouldn't be about revenge. Not exactly. It would be about revelation. Let her see what broke looks like when it rebuilds itself into something money could never buy. The day after, I walked through the mansion's halls again, admiring what we had made. I ran my hand along the banister, the smooth wood gleaming under the morning light. I stood before the mirror in the main hall, dressed neatly, face calm, eyes steady. The man looking back wasn't the one who'd been mocked at that restaurant. He wasn't the one they called senile or broke. He was the builder, the patient man, the survivor, and now, the quiet host. That night I stood at the edge of the property, where the lights from town shimmered faintly in the distance. The wind carried the scent of pine and evening rain. Almost ready, Eleanor, I said softly. They'll come soon enough. The trees whispered in reply and the fountain murmured behind me, steady and strong. Tomorrow there would be fresh flowers in the hall. Dinner set for 3, and one truth waiting to be served colder than wine. The letter reached her on a Wednesday. I know because by Friday morning my phone, an old prepaid one I only kept for the lawyer, buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I didn't answer. Some truths needed to be faced in person, not filtered through excuses or tears. By Saturday evening, the gates of the mansion stood open. The gravel driveway gleamed under the last orange light of sunset. Inside, candles burned steady on the long dining table, the scent of roasted herbs and bread drifting through the air. The house was silent except for the ticking of the hall clock and the soft rustle of curtains. I had prepared everything the way Eleanor would have. Simple, elegant, sincere. A bottle of her favorite red wine on the table, fresh lilies in a crystal vase, a quiet piano tune playing in the background. At exactly 7 o'clock, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. The SUV stopped halfway up the drive. For a moment, no one got out. I watched from the window as the headlights dimmed. The car door opened and Melissa stepped out. Hesitant, uncertain. Ryan followed, his usual swagger tempered by confusion. I could almost hear his thoughts. This can't be his place. They walked up the steps slowly, eyes sweeping across the columns, the lanterns. The carved oak door that gleamed with fresh polish. I opened it before they could knock. "Evening," I said quietly. Melissa froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Ryan blinked as if seeing a ghost. "Dad," she whispered. "How did you—" I smiled gently. "Come in. Dinner's ready?" They followed me inside like guests in a museum. The chandelier cast a warm glow across the marble floor, reflections dancing across the walls. Melissa's heels clicked nervously with every step. She reached out to touch the banister, almost to prove it was real. "This place. Is this yours?" she asked, voice trembling between awe and disbelief. "It is," I said. "Every brick." Ryan tried to recover his composure. "You bought this? How? I mean, weren't you broke?" I finished for him. "Yes, that's what you said." He chuckled awkwardly, tugging at his collar. We didn't mean—" "Please," I interrupted softly. "Sit down. Let's eat first. There's time for conversation afterward." They sat at the table, the weight of the room pressing on them. For once, Melissa didn't reach for her phone. She just stared at the golden plates, the wine glasses, the faint light flickering against her reflection. I served the food myself, roasted chicken, vegetables, and warm bread. Nothing extravagant, just honest, well-made, familiar. I poured them wine, then sat opposite, folding my hands on the table. For several minutes, no one spoke. Only the faint piano music filled the silence. Finally, Melissa broke it. "Dad, I don't understand," she said softly. "You disappeared. You thought I was helpless," I said. Senile, broken, easy to manipulate, her eyes dropped. "That's not fair." "It's perfectly fair," I said, voice calm. "You brought a realtor into my home. You tried to sell my house without asking. You made me sign papers you didn't even understand. And then you laughed about it." Her face went pale. Dad, I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared. You were losing things, your business, your memory." "My memory's fine," I said. "And my business isn't what I lost. It's what I learned from losing it that changed me." Ryan leaned back, trying to mask his discomfort with a smirk. "So what, did you win the lottery or something?" I turned to him slowly. "No, I found something worth more than any lottery. Your mother-in-law's foresight." He frowned. "What?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out Eleanor's letter, the same yellowed paper sealed with her initials. I placed it on the table. Melissa stared at it like it might burn her fingers. "Mom's handwriting," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "She left it for me, hidden, waiting for the day I'd need to remember who I was." Inside was proof of something she did quietly, without telling anyone. She invested in a company decades ago, and she did it in my name. Melissa blinked, tears forming. She did that?" "She did," I said. "Because she believed I'd spend my life giving everything to others, and she wanted to leave something that could never be stolen, not even by family." Ryan's voice cracked. "So you're rich now?" I looked at him evenly. "No, Ryan, I'm not rich, I'm restored." The room fell into deep silence. Melissa reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Dad, I didn't know. If I had—" "You did know," I said gently. "You just didn't care." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I was worried, okay? Ryan said we couldn't afford to help you anymore, and I panicked. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I said. "You meant it when you said I was useless. When you said I should be put somewhere cheap. When you laughed about my house. You meant it when you posted that picture online, the one about your broke old man." She covered her face, sobbing quietly. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, staring down at his untouched plate. I stood slowly and walked to the mantel above the fireplace. From it, I took down a small framed photo. The old house they'd mocked. The one I'd spent 40 years building with Eleanor. The paint peeling, the roof sagging, the lawn overgrown. But to me, it had been paradise. I placed the frame in front of Melissa. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. She nodded through tears. "The old house." I turned it over. On the back, in my handwriting, was a single line. "What you mocked built this." Her hands shook as she read it. "Dad, please," she whispered. "I made a mistake. We both did. Let me make it right." "There's nothing to make right," I said softly. "You see, you didn't destroy me. You freed me. You gave me the chance to start over without carrying your expectations. And I built something from it." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "Then why invite us here, to humiliate me?" I shook my head. "No, to show you what real wealth looks like, because you still think it's money, houses, status. But it's this: peace, purpose, the ability to wake up in the morning without bitterness in your chest. That's wealth." Ryan spoke up, bitterness creeping in. "So that's it? You're just cutting her off forever?" I looked at him calmly. "I already did. I left you nothing but the truth. Spend it wisely." He stood abruptly, muttering something under his breath. Melissa stayed seated, staring at the photo as if it might explain everything she'd done wrong. When she finally stood, she looked smaller, deflated, lost. "I miss Mom," she said quietly. I smiled sadly. "So do I, every day. But she's still here, in this house, in what she left behind. She built something that could survive both time and disappointment." Melissa took a shaky breath. "Can I come back, just to visit?" "Of course," I said. "This house isn't about exclusion, but you'll come as a guest, not an heir." Her lips parted, but she didn't argue. Some lessons needed silence more than words. After they left, I stood at the window, watching their car vanish down the long drive. The mansion seemed to exhale as if relieved. The candlelight flickered softly in the stillness. I returned to the table, picked up the photo frame, and looked at the words I'd written again. Then I turned it back over, placing it where it belonged, right beside Eleanor's letter. The piano was still playing quietly in the background. I sat before it and pressed a few keys. The melody came slow, steady, imperfect. "Thank you," I murmured into the emptiness, "for teaching me what love really means, even when it hurts." And somewhere between the notes and the silence, I felt Eleanor's presence settle in the air. A warmth, a whisper, a kind of peace that didn't need to be seen to be real. It has been 3 months since that dinner. The house feels different. Now, not because of its size or its beauty, but because it finally breathes right. The air hums with quiet rather than tension. The echo of footsteps belongs only to me, and for the first time in years, that doesn't feel lonely. It feels earned. Melissa hasn't called. Neither has Ryan. I suppose silence is their final defense, the only language left when guilt runs out of words. I used to think reconciliation was the goal, that someday I'd hear her voice again and we'd fix what was broken. But I've learned that some silences don't need to be filled. Some are meant to heal, not to be answered. Every morning now begins the same way. I rise early, make coffee strong enough to wake the walls and open the windows of my study. The scent of pine and lilies drifts in. Lilies because they were Eleanor's favorite. I planted them along the front garden where sunlight touches first. When they bloom, the entire porch smells like memory and forgiveness. The study itself has become my sanctuary. Sunlight spills across the old oak desk I restored myself, the same one I used in my workshop decades ago. The scars in its wood are like me, visible, permanent, but proof of survival. Most days I work quietly, fixing small furniture pieces, carving toys to donate to the children's home in town. I don't sell anything anymore. Creation without profit feels cleaner, almost holy. Sometimes local workers I hired for the mansion drop by for tea. We talk about tools, wood grain, the weather. Never money, never family. They call me Mr. Hale, but when they leave, they always shake my hand like equals. I've learned that dignity doesn't come from what people call you. It comes from how you live when no one's watching. Outside, the gardens have become a kind of scripture. Every flower, every trimmed hedge, every stone path carries intention. I walk them every evening, listening to the fountain and the wind moving through the trees. Sometimes, if the sunset is soft enough, I imagine Eleanor walking beside me, her hand brushing the petals, her voice teasing me about watering too much. I speak to her as if she's still here. Maybe she is. One evening, while tending the lilies, I found a small wooden box I'd built years ago, back when Melissa was little. Inside were tiny carvings, a bird, a heart, and a miniature house. I'd made them to teach her patience. She'd lost interest halfway through. I smiled at the memory, placed the box back on the shelf in my study, and thought, maybe patience skipped a generation. The truth is, I no longer resent her. The hurt. Yes, it lingers like an old scar, but resentment is too heavy to carry this far into peace. I don't need her apology to be whole. I don't even need her to understand. Some lessons are meant for the soul, not the ears. On Sundays, I drive into town for groceries. A few neighbors nod politely, still unsure what to make of the quiet. Man who bought the old Holloway place and turned it into something beautiful. Sometimes the bakery owner slips an extra loaf of bread into my bag. Sometimes the children from the nearby school wave when they see me in the garden. It's a small life now, but it fits. I've rebuilt more than walls here. I've rebuilt rhythm, the steady hum of a simple, honorable day. The mansion, once a ruin, has become a metaphor for everything I'd forgotten. That value doesn't vanish when people stop believing in you. It's just waiting for you to believe in yourself again. Last night I sat in my study as rain whispered against the windows. The lamp cast a warm circle of light on the desk, and the air smelled faintly of varnish and coffee. I reached for the envelope, Eleanor's letter still folded neatly, the paper now soft at the edges from all the times I'd read it. I opened it once more, tracing her handwriting with my thumb. If you ever lose faith, look for this. You built more than you realize. I read it slowly, letting the words sink in, the same way sunlight sinks into wood. Then I leaned back and whispered into the stillness. You were right. I was never broke. I just forgot what mattered. The words stayed in the air, gentle and unhurried. I imagined her smiling somewhere unseen, the way she used to when I finally understood her lessons too late. Before heading to bed, I stepped outside one last time. The rain had stopped. The world was clean, the moon soft, the lilies glistening with droplets like tiny pearls. The house behind me glowed faintly through the windows, not as a display of wealth, but as a living testimony of endurance. I thought about Melissa then, about how she might drive past someday, not knowing whether to stop. Maybe she'll see the lights and remember the man she once called Dad. Maybe guilt will ache in her chest for a moment, then fade. That's fine, because I've realized something. Sometimes you don't have to punish those who betray you. Just succeed so quietly, they have to live with the echo. I stood there for a long while, letting the wind move through the garden, carrying the sound of water and night birds. Then I smiled, turned off the porch light, and closed the door behind me. Inside, peace waited. Not loud, not triumphant, just steady. And as the clock ticked in the hall, I knew that whatever time I had left would be spent exactly as Eleanor intended. Not rich, not broken, just whole. If this story touched you, comment the word peace and subscribe for more stories about dignity, family, and quiet revenge.